In the remote wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains, veteran Amelia Harper puts all her strength behind a crowbar. What she's trying to open is no ordinary chest. It's a massive, rusted block of metal buried beneath the earth for decades. Beside her, her service dog Luna lets out a low growl, a sound of profound unease. With a horrifying screech of rusted metal, the door finally gives way, but what greets Amelia is not some forgotten treasure. A wave of foul air, the smell of decay and time itself trapped within, rushes out from the dense darkness inside. She is about to confront a truth far darker than the blackness before her. The Appalachians in late autumn possessed a raw, untamed beauty that Amelia Harper had come to cherish. Rolling hills draped in a tapestry of fading greens, burnt oranges, and deep crimsons stretched as far as the eye could see, eventually blurring into the hazy horizon. The crisp air, tinged with the scent of pine and damp earth, filled her lungs with a clarity she rarely found within the confines of four walls. For Amelia, a woman whose mind was often a battlefield of echoes and shadows, this sprawling wilderness was more than just an escape. It was a sanctuary, a quiet companion in her ongoing struggle for peace. Amelia, at 36, carried the invisible scars of a decorated military career. Her frame, still lean and taut from years of active duty, moved with an economical grace, each step measured, deliberate. Her short-cropped auburn hair was starting to show faint streaks of gray at the temples, a testament to years of high-stakes decisions and sleepless nights. A faint, almost imperceptible tension often held her jaw, and her eyes, a piercing shade of green, usually scanned her surroundings with an intensity born of perpetual vigilance. Yet when they landed on Luna, the German shepherd by her side, a softness would momentarily dissolve the hardness, revealing a warmth that few people ever witnessed. Luna, an 8-year-old German shepherd, was a magnificent creature. Her coat, a striking blend of silver gray and stark white, gave her an almost spectral appearance against the muted forest floor. Her intelligence shone through her dark, alert eyes, and her powerful, muscular body moved with an effortless confidence that bespoke years of rigorous training. Luna wasn't just a pet, she was Amelia's former canine partner, a bond forged in the crucible of combat zones. She was Amelia's shadow, her protector, and, more importantly, her anchor. Where Amelia sometimes struggled to ground herself in the present, Luna was always there, a solid, breathing testament to unwavering loyalty. This particular morning, they had set out early, the first rays of the sun painting long, slender shadows across the forest floor. Amelia carried a lightweight hunting pack, not necessarily for a kill but for the ritual of the trek itself. Luna trotted slightly ahead, her nose constantly working, sampling the rich tapestry of woodland scents. They navigated a familiar trail, a narrow deer path that wound deeper into a lesser frequented section of the Monongahela National Forest, heading toward a series of rocky bluffs Amelia wanted to explore. Suddenly, Luna stopped dead, her hackles rising almost imperceptibly. A low, guttural growl rumbled in her chest, a sound Amelia knew well, a signal of unease, not aggression, but definite alarm. Luna's head darted from side to side, her nose twitching frantically before she began pulling insistently toward a dense, overgrown ravine that branched off the main path. "What is it, girl?" Amelia murmured, her hand instinctively going to the small fixed-blade knife on her belt, a reflex she couldn't quite shake. She followed Luna, trusting her partner's instincts implicitly. The ravine, normally a trickle, showed signs of a recent flash flood, the banks deeply scoured, revealing layers of earth and rock that were usually hidden. The air here was heavy with the smell of damp soil and something else, something metallic and acrid, buried deep. Luna plunged down into the ravine, her powerful legs easily navigating the loose scree and exposed tree roots. She stopped at a section where the floodwaters had carved away a significant portion of the bank, revealing something massive and out of place. It was a section of metal, flat, dull gray, pitted with deep rust but incredibly thick. It didn't look like natural rock nor like any forestry equipment Amelia had ever seen. Amelia knelt, Luna's nose nudging the strange object. She ran her gloved hand over the cold, rough surface. It was unmistakably man-made, yet fused with the earth as if it had always been there. She pulled out her multi-tool, deploying a small pick, and carefully scraped away the clinging mud and fragments of rock. More of the metal was exposed, revealing seams and bolts that hinted at a much larger structure. This wasn't just a piece of scrap, it was part of something substantial, something engineered for immense strength. "That's not just an old barrel, is it, girl?" Amelia muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. The sheer thickness of the metal, the way it resisted her prying, spoke of heavy-duty construction. It reminded her vaguely of some armored vehicles she had encountered in her past life, though this was far too small for that, yet the robustness was undeniable. It was designed to protect, to contain. She spent the next hour working meticulously, clearing the debris. The exposed section suggested it was flat, part of a side or a roof, and extended deep into the earth. The flood had done her a favor, eroding away decades of concealment. The Appalachians, with their dense foliage in remote hollows, were adept at reclaiming forgotten things, swallowing them whole into their green maw. But something about this felt different. It wasn't a discarded piece of farm machinery or an old moonshine still. The precision of its construction, the sheer weight of its presence, resonated with a trained eye. "It's too heavy for a simple old safe, Luna," Amelia mused, patting the dog's head. Luna responded with a soft whimper, her eyes fixed on the mysterious object, still vigilant. Amelia could discern the faint outlines of what might have been a large, recessed panel or perhaps even a heavily reinforced door, buried mostly under the remaining earth. This wasn't just a container, it was a fortified chamber. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple. Amelia knew she couldn't do much more with the meager tools she had. She needed something stronger, something more industrial. The sheer effort of clearing even this small section had exhausted her, and a strange sense of unease was starting to settle in. This wasn't a simple archaeological find, this felt significant and potentially dangerous. "All right, girl," Amelia said, standing up and stretching her aching back. "We found something big, something that probably shouldn't have been found." She carefully marked the location with a few stacked stones, a silent promise to return. Luna, sensing Amelia's changed demeanor, stayed close, her body brushing against Amelia's leg, a silent reassurance. As they began the trek back, the fading light seemed to amplify the silence of the Appalachians, a silence that now felt less peaceful and more watchful. The peculiar glimmer of rust-colored metal in the ravine had snagged Amelia's attention, pulling her inevitably into a mystery that had lain dormant for far too long. She knew, with a soldier's certainty, that her peaceful solitude was about to be irrevocably broken. Sleep did not come easily to Amelia. The image of the rusted metal, a silent behemoth slumbering beneath the earth, played on a loop in her mind. It wasn't the discovery itself that unsettled her but the feeling it evoked, a sense of profound and violent stillness, a secret kept not by choice but by the sheer weight of soil and time. She rose before the sun, the cool pre-dawn air doing little to clear the disquiet from her thoughts. Luna was already awake, her intelligent eyes watching Amelia's every move, a silent question in her gaze. She knew today was different. After a quick, functional breakfast of coffee and oatmeal, Amelia went to the heavy-duty toolbox bolted to the bed of her Chevy pickup. She retrieved a long steel crowbar, its heft familiar and reassuring in her hands. From a storage compartment beneath the rear seat, she pulled out her old military-issue entrenching tool, a compact folding shovel made of hardened steel. It was a tool she had carried through deserts and mountains, a simple, brutally effective piece of equipment designed for one purpose, moving earth. She was no longer a soldier, but the muscle memory, the instinct to prepare for a difficult task, remained deeply ingrained. The return to the ravine felt different from the day before. The morning mist clung to the hollows, muffling sound and lending an ethereal quality to the woods. Luna trotted close to Amelia's side, foregoing her usual scouting patrols. The air of anticipation was palpable, a shared, unspoken understanding that they were approaching something significant. When they arrived, the exposed corner of metal looked exactly as she had left it, an ugly, rust-colored scar on the face of the ravine. Amelia took a moment to survey the scene, her mind slipping into the familiar cadence of tactical assessment. She identified the faint, straight lines in the earth that suggested the top and side of a large door. That would be her target. "All right, girl, watch my back," she said, her voice low. Luna let out a soft whine and settled onto a high point of the bank, her head on her paws but her eyes alert, scanning their surroundings. The work was brutal. The Appalachian soil was a stubborn mix of clay and rock, compacted by decades of pressure. Amelia's first few strikes with the entrenching tool barely made a dent. She gritted her teeth and fell into a rhythm, the rhythmic scrape and thud of the shovel the only sound in the quiet woods. Sweat soon soaked the back of her shirt, and her muscles, though strong, began to burn with the strain. This was not the loose topsoil of a garden, this was a geological seal, fortified by a dense, tangled web of roots. She had to switch tactics often, using the pick end of the tool to break up the larger rocks and then the shovel to clear the debris. Thick, gnarled roots, some as wide as her wrist, had woven themselves around the metal object, acting as natural rebar. She had to use her knife to saw through them, the serrated edge protesting against the tough, woody fibers. Hours bled into one another. The sun climbed high overhead, its warmth turning the ravine into a humid bowl. Amelia worked on, fueled by a grim determination. With every shovelful of earth, with every severed root, she felt she was not just digging but peeling back the layers of a forgotten history. Slowly, painstakingly, the outline of a large, rectangular door emerged. It was heavily reinforced, with massive, rusted hinges on one side and what looked like a complex locking mechanism on the other. The sheer scale of it confirmed her suspicions. This was no ordinary vehicle. This was a vault on wheels. By early afternoon, she had cleared a 3-foot trench around the door's perimeter. She was exhausted, her hands raw despite her gloves, her back a knot of aching muscles. She took a long drink of water, her breathing heavy. It was time. She wedged the pointed end of the crowbar into the seam between the door and its frame, levering all her strength. At first, nothing. The door was fused shut by rust and pressure. She repositioned the crowbar, finding a better angle, and tried again. A low, tortured groan echoed through the ravine, the sound of metal surrendering after a long, silent battle. A line of rust flaked away. Encouraged, Amelia pushed harder, her muscles screaming in protest. With a deafening screech that sent a startled flock of birds scattering from the trees, the seal broke. The door moved only an inch, but it was enough. She worked the crowbar back and forth, widening the gap until, finally, with a final, shuddering bang, the heavy door swung inward and slammed against something inside, opening into a cavern of absolute darkness. Amelia stood back, catching her breath as a wave of foul air washed over her, the thick, cloying stench of decay, mildew, and stagnant time. It was the odor of a sealed tomb, and for a moment, she felt a profound sense of trespass. She pulled a powerful LED flashlight from her pack, its beam cutting a sharp, white circle into the oppressive blackness. Luna, who had crept down the bank, stood beside her, a low growl of apprehension rumbling in her chest. Taking a deep breath, Amelia stepped through the doorway. The flashlight beam swept across the interior. The space was larger than she expected, the floor and walls made of solid steel. Her light first fell upon a scattering of objects on the floor, and her blood ran cold. They were bones, skeletons, 2 of them, slumped in what had once been seats in the front of the compartment. The remains were clad in the tattered, mold-eaten remnants of uniforms. Amelia could just make out the faded colors and an old, peeling patch on one of the sleeves, the logo of a security company. This was not just an abandoned truck, it was a coffin. She moved deeper, her boots crunching softly on debris. The scene was one of frozen, violent chaos. Empty shell casings littered the floor. A rusted shotgun lay near the back wall. In the center of the compartment was a large safe, its door mangled and torn from its hinges. The entire scene screamed of a final, desperate struggle. While Amelia stood, trying to process the grim tableau, Luna began to act strangely. The dog ignored the skeletons, her attention fixed on the area beneath the driver's seat. She sniffed intently, her tail low, and then began to paw insistently at the floor, whining softly, "What is it, Luna? What did you find?" Amelia directed her flashlight to where the dog was scratching. At first, she saw nothing but grime and rusted metal, but as she looked closer, she saw a small object wedged deep in a seam where the floor met the wall. She knelt, using the tip of her knife to carefully pry it loose. It was a metal lighter, a classic Zippo, its silver plating tarnished with age. She wiped the grime away on her trousers and flipped it over in her palm. There, elegantly engraved on the surface, were two initials, K.L. Amelia stood up, the weight of the lighter in her hand feeling immense. Her flashlight beam drifted from the lighter to the skeletal remains and back again. The silence of the tomb pressed in on her. She had come here seeking answers to a simple mystery, but instead, she had unearthed a story of violence and death, a story that had been successfully silenced for decades. And now, holding this small, personal token, she knew she had just become a part of it. Amelia did not return to the Iron Tomb. After meticulously covering the entrance with fallen branches and loose brush to obscure her work, she and Luna made the long, somber trek back to their campsite. The Zippo lighter felt heavy and cold in her pocket, a tangible link to the violent secret she had unearthed. She knew she couldn't proceed on instinct alone. She needed facts, context. She needed to know what story the world had been told before she could understand the one the forest had kept hidden. The next morning, she left Luna on guard at the secluded campsite, the dog's steady presence a comfort even in her absence. Amelia drove her truck 20 miles to the nearest town, a small, sleepy hamlet named Willow Hollow. The name was an irony that wasn't lost on her. The town was nestled in a valley, a single main street lined with old brick buildings that had seen better days. It was the kind of place where time seemed to move slower, where secrets could easily take root and grow undisturbed in the quiet soil of community life. She parked in front of the county library, a modest, single-story building that smelled of old paper and floor polish. Behind the circulation desk sat a woman with silver hair pinned in a tight bun and sharp, intelligent eyes behind half-moon reading glasses. A small, engraved nameplate identified her as Clara Whitmore, the town librarian. She looked up as Amelia entered, her expression neutral but appraising. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice crisp and clear. Amelia put on her most disarming, academic demeanor. "I hope so," she said. "My name's Amelia. I'm a bit of a history enthusiast, and I'm researching the old logging routes in this part of the Appalachians. I was hoping you might have some local newspapers on file, from the 1980s, say 1985 to 1990. Mrs. Whitmore studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "We have everything on microfilm. The machine is in the back. I'll get you the reels for the years you requested." She returned shortly with several small boxes, showing Amelia how to thread the film into the clunky, beige reader. Amelia thanked her and settled in, the room silent save for the whirring of the machine and the soft clicks as she scrolled through the years. She scanned past local politics, high school football scores, and advertisements for farm equipment. It was a slow, painstaking process. Then, in an issue of the West Virginia Gazette from late September of 1987, she found it. The headline was stark: "Armored Vehicle Vanishes on Rural Route." She leaned closer, her heart rate quickening. The article detailed how a Guardian security transport vehicle had disappeared while en route to a regional bank in Charleston, West Virginia. It was carrying $5 million in cash. The truck and its two-man crew, both named in the article, had simply vanished. The last known contact was a routine radio check just after it had passed through a town not far from Willow Hollow. She kept scrolling through the following weeks. The story was major news. Search parties scoured the woods and back roads, state police set up roadblocks, theories flew from a professional hijacking to an inside job. But there was nothing, no wreckage, no ransom note, no sign of the crew or the money. Within a few months, the articles grew smaller, moved to the back pages, and then disappeared entirely, swallowed by the relentless tide of new headlines. The case, it seemed, had gone cold with an unnatural speed. It had simply ceased to be a story. With the information she needed, Amelia left the library and headed to the social heart of the town, the Hollowside Diner. It was a classic small-town eatery with red vinyl booths, a long formica countertop, and the comforting aroma of brewing coffee and frying bacon. A couple of older men in overalls sat at the counter, their conversation a low, continuous murmur. Amelia took a seat in a booth by the window. The man who came to take her order was burly, in his late 50s, with a thick, graying mustache and watchful eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His apron was stained, and he moved with the weary efficiency of someone who had been on his feet all day. A name tag pinned to his shirt read Earl. "What can I get for you?" Earl asked, his voice a low grumble. "Just a coffee and a piece of that apple pie, please," Amelia said. When Earl returned with her order, she initiated her cover story. "I was just over at the library," she began, her tone casual, "doing some research on the old logging trails around here. Tough work back in the day, I imagine." One of the men at the counter grunted in agreement. "Built this whole county, that work did." "I'll bet," Amelia said, taking a sip of coffee. "I was wondering, in all that time, were there ever any big stories from out in those woods? Major accidents, strange disappearances, anything like that? Something that people still talk about?" The effect was instantaneous and chilling. The low murmur of conversation at the counter didn't just quiet down, it stopped. The man who had spoken turned back to his coffee, his shoulders tensing slightly. Earl, who had been wiping down the counter, paused, his hand still. A silence descended on the diner, thick and uncomfortable. Earl's eyes, which had been merely watchful, now became hard and guarded. "Folks mostly keep to themselves around here," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its earlier gruff warmth. "The woods are the woods. People don't go looking for trouble." Amelia pressed gently, feigning innocent curiosity. "It's just for a history project, you know. Sometimes those old local stories are the most interesting. I read about a big disappearance back in 1987, an armored truck, that was the final straw." Earl placed his rag down on the counter with a deliberate thud. "We don't talk about that," he said, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable edge of finality. "It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order." He gave Amelia a long, cold look. "Anything else I can get for you?" "No, that'll be all," Amelia replied, understanding she had pushed as far as she could. The wall of silence was impenetrable. This wasn't just a forgotten story, it was a forbidden one. She finished her pie, paid her bill, and left a generous tip. As she walked out the door, she could feel Earl's eyes on her back. She got into her truck and drove away, the idyllic facade of Willow Hollow now seeming like a thin veneer over something dark and rotten. She had her confirmation, the truck in the woods was the one from the papers, and its secret was being actively, aggressively guarded by the people of this town. Back inside the Hollowside Diner, Earl watched Amelia's truck disappear down the main street, his face a grim mask of concern. He picked up Amelia's empty coffee cup and plate, his movements slow and heavy. After placing them in the wash basin, he wiped his hands on his apron and walked purposefully toward the small office in the back. He closed the door, picked up the old rotary phone on his desk, and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, someone picked up. "It's Earl," he said, his voice hushed and urgent. "We have a problem. There's a new woman in town, an outsider, and she's asking questions about 1987. The drive back from Willow Hollow was cloaked in a new kind of silence. It was no longer the peaceful solitude Amelia had sought but a heavy, watchful quiet that seemed to press in from the dense woods lining the road. The encounter at the diner had confirmed her worst suspicions. This wasn't a cold case, it was a buried one, and she had just disturbed the grave. Her questions had acted like a shovel striking the lid of a coffin someone had gone to great lengths to keep hidden. As her truck rumbled down the dirt track leading to her campsite, a familiar sense of hypervigilance washed over Amelia, a feeling she hadn't truly experienced since her last deployment. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves registered not as the normal sounds of the forest but as a potential threat. She parked the truck in its usual spot under a canopy of maple trees and got out. She expected Luna to come bounding out to greet her, her powerful body a blur of silver and white, but the dog was nowhere in sight. Instead, a low, menacing growl emanated from the direction of the campsite. It sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through Amelia. That wasn't Luna's warning growl, it was her combat growl, the one reserved for an immediate and present danger. "Luna, heel," Amelia commanded, her voice sharp and low. She drew the heavy maglite from the door of her truck, its weight a poor substitute for a weapon but better than nothing. She moved forward cautiously, her steps silent on the packed earth, her eyes scanning the shadows. She found Luna standing rigid near the campfire pit, her body lowered in a defensive stance, her teeth bared. The dog's gaze was fixed on the small, rustic wooden table Amelia had built next to her tent, and what Amelia saw there made her stomach clench. Embedded deep in the center of the wooden tabletop, quivering slightly from the force of the impact, was a large hunting knife. It was not a factory-made blade but a custom, hand-forged piece, the kind favored by serious local hunters. Its handle was made of polished elk antler, and the blade itself was wickedly sharp. It was a message delivered with brutal clarity: we know who you are. We know where you are. And we can get to you. Amelia's gaze swept the ground around the campsite. She immediately spotted them, the faint impressions of heavy boots in the soft earth near the edge of the clearing. 2 sets of tracks, one noticeably larger than the other. They had been here, and recently. The intruders had been careful, but not careful enough to fool a trained eye. They had come, delivered their warning, and left. Luna's presence had likely kept them from doing anything more. Good girl, Amelia whispered, placing a steadying hand on Luna's back. The dog relaxed slightly, the growl subsiding to a low rumble, but she remained tense, her body a coiled spring. The initial shock quickly gave way to a cold, familiar calm. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. This was no longer a historical mystery, it was a tactical situation. She had been compromised. Her position was known. She was no longer the hunter, she was the hunted. And that meant the rules had changed. She spent the next hour sweeping the perimeter, Luna trotting silently at her heels. She found more signs of their visit, a broken branch here, a scuffed patch of moss there. They had been thorough in their reconnaissance. They knew the layout of her camp, the location of her truck, her tent. They had assessed her. The cold professionalism of it chilled her more than the knife itself. These were not common thugs. Returning to the camp, Amelia looked at her simple setup, a tent, a campfire, a truck, and saw only vulnerabilities. The piece she had built for herself here had been an illusion, a fragile bubble that had just been burst by a single violent act. But despair was not in her nature. Action was. All right, Luna, she said, her voice resolute. Time to go to work. The rest of the afternoon was a whirlwind of focused activity. The skills that had kept her alive in hostile territories came flooding back, as natural as breathing. First, she moved her truck, parking it in a new position that offered a quick and clear line of egress but was also less visible from the main track. Then she addressed the campsite itself. She took down the tent, which was a clear and obvious target. Instead, she constructed a low, discreet lean-to using a camouflage tarp and fallen branches, situating it in a dense thicket that offered both concealment and a solid backdrop. It was far less comfortable but infinitely more defensible. Next, she established a perimeter defense. She didn't have access to military-grade equipment, but she had a soldier's ingenuity. Using thin, strong fishing line, she set up a series of low-slung tripwires around the camp's approaches. She tied small, empty tin cans filled with pebbles to the lines. They wouldn't stop an intruder, but they would make a racket, buying her precious seconds of warning. She carefully concealed them with leaves and dirt, marking their locations in her mind with the precision of a cartographer. She also dug a small cache, lining it with a waterproof bag, and buried her most important supplies, a spare GPS unit, emergency rations, a first aid kit, and the Zippo lighter. If she had to abandon the camp in a hurry, she would not leave empty-handed. As dusk began to settle, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees, Amelia sat with her back against a thick maple, her hunting rifle cleaned, loaded, and resting across her lap. Luna lay at her feet, not sleeping but in a state of watchful repose, her ears twitching at every distant sound. The campsite was no longer a place of rest, it had been transformed into a forward operating base, a defensive position in a war she hadn't asked for. The silence of the Appalachians returned, but now it was filled with a new tension. She was ready. Let them come. The morning after the warning, a cold determination settled over Amelia. The incident with the hunting knife had crystallized her purpose. She couldn't leave this alone. The message was clear: someone wanted the past to stay buried. But the knowledge of 2 dead men locked away in an iron tomb fueled a different kind of resolve. She would find out who was behind this, not just for her own safety, but for the silent victims in the ravine. She believed the armored vehicle still held secrets deeper than the bones and scattered shell casings. After a thorough check of her perimeter and a quiet conversation with Luna, who seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, Amelia packed a small tactical backpack. It contained water, a first aid kit, her trusty field knife, and a compact digital camera she usually reserved for wildlife photography. This time, it would capture evidence. Luna, a silent sentinel, took point as they moved through the transformed, now alert woods. The trek back to the ravine felt different this time. Every shadow seemed to hold a watchful eye, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Amelia moved with the familiar, fluid motion of a soldier, her senses heightened, constantly scanning, listening. Luna, always a step ahead or to the side, served as her advanced warning system, her nose and ears picking up nuances that Amelia's human senses couldn't. They reached the hidden entrance to the armored vehicle without incident. Amelia removed the carefully placed camouflage, revealing the gaping, dark maw of the door. The stench of decay was still present, though slightly less overpowering after a night of ventilation. She stepped inside, Luna remaining a watchful presence at the entrance, her gaze sweeping the tree line. Amelia's flashlight caught through the darkness, illuminating the grim interior. She meticulously photographed the skeletons, the rusted shotgun, the mangled safe, and the scattered shell casings. Each click of the camera's shutter felt like an accusation. This wasn't just a crime scene, it was a testament to cold-blooded murder and a desperate cover-up. She then began to examine the vehicle itself with a new intensity. She moved slowly, methodically, her hands running along the cold, unyielding steel panels. She checked every seam, every corner, every possible cavity that a fleeing criminal or a desperate victim might use to hide something. The initial raiders would have been focused on the main safe, on the obvious prize, but what if there was something they had missed? She paid particular attention to the floor. The metal was old, rusted, and scarred. She tapped it with the butt of her knife, listening for changes in resonance. Under the driver's seat, where Luna had found the Zippo lighter, Amelia noticed a faint, rectangular seam in the steel floor, almost invisible beneath layers of grime and surface rust. It was not a part of the original construction but a modification, skillfully done, then painted over. Her heart pounded. This was it. This was the deeper secret. She spent another hour using her knife and crowbar, patiently prying at the edges of the hidden panel. The work was slow, intricate, requiring a delicacy that belied the brute strength needed earlier to open the main door. Finally, with a soft clang, a section of the floor, about 2 feet by 3 feet, lifted slightly. Beneath it lay a cavity lined with a thick, waterproof tarp that had hardened and stiffened over the decades. Inside the cavity, stacked neatly, were numerous bundles wrapped in heavy-duty plastic and sealed with thick electrical tape. They were not just bundles, they were bricks of cash. Amelia carefully pulled out the topmost bundle. The outer plastic was brittle, cracked, and covered in a fine layer of mold, just as she had anticipated. She peeled away the outer layers, revealing a smaller, inner vacuum-sealed bag. This, too, showed signs of age, but the seal was intact. Through the clear plastic, she could see tightly compressed stacks of $100 bills, crisp and green, largely untouched by the ravages of time and moisture. She estimated the value of this hidden hoard to be close to $2 million. The original thieves, in their haste and focus on the main safe, had completely missed this, or perhaps it was a contingency plan, an escape route for one of the inside men, never realized. She snapped several photos of the money, close-ups of the bills, the bundles, the hidden compartment itself. This was irrefutable proof, not just of a robbery but of a fortune still lying dormant, waiting. She carefully selected one of the better preserved bundles, the outer plastic peeling slightly but the inner seal still holding. This would be her physical evidence. She carefully placed it into a waterproof bag, then secured it deep within her tactical backpack. As she was meticulously replacing the hidden panel, uncovering it with the grime and rust flakes, Luna suddenly let out a low, drawn-out growl from her position outside the vehicle. It was deeper, more urgent than before. Amelia froze, her muscles tensing. "What is it, girl?" she whispered, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her field knife. Luna didn't respond directly, but her growl intensified, her body dropping into a lower, more defensive stance. Then Amelia heard it, too, a distant sound at first, a faint rumbling that slowly grew louder. The distinct hum of powerful engines, not one, but two, and they were getting closer, rapidly moving along a rough, seldom-used logging track that wound around the distant ridge, heading straight for the ravine. The blood in Amelia's veins turned to ice. They knew. Someone had told them, and they were coming. She glanced at the concealed compartment she had just resealed, then at the entrance of the armored truck, then at Luna, whose eyes were now fixed on the approach, reflecting a primal, ancient warning. She had minutes, perhaps less. Her peaceful solitude in the Appalachians was not just broken, it was under attack, and they had the money. The rumbling of the SUVs grew louder, closer, echoing ominously through the ravine. Amelia knew she was exposed, trapped within the confines of the iron tomb. There was no time to replace the camouflage over the door. She had mere seconds to react. Her military training, honed over years of life-or-death situations, kicked in. She wasn't thinking, she was acting. "Luna, stay with me," she whispered urgently as she burst out of the armored vehicle. Luna, ever alert, was already moving, falling in beside Amelia's left leg as they sprinted up the steep bank of the ravine. Amelia's eyes darted around, mapping escape routes, identifying cover. The dense foliage of the Appalachians, once a haven, was now a potential labyrinth for evasion. As they cleared the top of the bank, the first of the black SUVs, a heavily modified Chevy Tahoe, screeched to a halt on the old logging track. The driver, a hulking man with a shaved head and a grim expression, immediately spotted Amelia and Luna. The passenger door flew open, and a second man, slimmer but equally imposing with a neatly trimmed beard, jumped out, a rifle already in his hands. "Freeze! Don't move," the bearded man yelled, his voice cutting through the air. Amelia didn't hesitate. She knew these men weren't here for a polite conversation, they were here to silence her. She plunged deeper into the woods, Luna a blur of silver and white beside her. The Appalachians' rugged terrain became their ally. They ducked under low-hanging branches, scrambled over fallen logs, and plunged through thickets of rhododendron, thorns tearing at Amelia's clothes but failing to slow her down. The two men from the SUV were fast, but they were not accustomed to this kind of relentless, untamed wilderness. They wore heavy boots and tactical gear, which, while effective in open ground, hindered them in the dense, uneven forest. Their pursuit was marked by crashing through undergrowth, rather than Amelia's fluid, silent movement. "Spread out." Amelia heard the bearded man shout. "She can't get far." She pushed herself harder, the backpack with the money bouncing against her back, a constant reminder of the stakes. She drew on a well of endurance she thought she had long since depleted. Luna, despite her age, was tireless, her powerful legs effortlessly carrying her over obstacles. She seemed to draw energy from the danger, her senses fully engaged, leading Amelia through the densest parts of the forest, instinctively choosing paths that offered maximum cover. Amelia quickly employed evasion tactics. She ran in zigzags, broke visual contact, and then doubled back, making it harder for her pursuers to predict her movements. She knew she couldn't outrun them indefinitely in a straight line, especially if they were younger and fresh. Her advantage lay in her knowledge of unconventional warfare and the terrain. She spotted a small rocky outcrop ahead, riddled with fissures and partially hidden by a curtain of vines. Perfect. She plunged into it, Luna right behind her, using the natural features to break line of sight. She could hear her pursuers getting closer, their heavy footsteps crashing through the undergrowth. "She went this way," one of them shouted, his voice closer now. Amelia flattened herself against the cold rock, Luna crouched low beside her, a barely visible shadow. She heard them arguing, their voices muffled by the foliage, trying to pinpoint her exact location. They were perhaps 50 yards away, fanning out. She needed a diversion. She needed to buy herself time, not just minutes, but precious seconds to put more distance between them. She looked at Luna, whose intelligent eyes met hers. A silent understanding passed between them. Amelia pulled a small, smooth river stone from her pocket, a worry stone she sometimes carried. She carefully lobbed it toward a patch of dense undergrowth about 30 yards to her left, away from her position. The stone landed with a sharp crackle of dry leaves and a rustle. "Did you hear that?" the bigger man yelled. "Over there! She's trying to flank us." The two men immediately shifted their attention, moving toward the sound, their backs momentarily turned to Amelia's true position. This was her chance. "Luna, now," Amelia whispered, pointing. The German shepherd didn't need a second command. She exploded from cover, a silent silver and white missile. She didn't charge directly at the men. Instead, with astonishing speed and agility, she circled wide, coming up on the flank of the bearded man, who was intently focused on the decoy sound. The bearded man suddenly let out a startled yell as Luna, without a sound, lunged. She didn't bite to kill, she bit to disable. Her powerful jaws closed around the man's lower leg, just above the ankle. The man screamed, stumbled, and fell hard, his rifle clattering uselessly to the ground. Luna held her grip for a precious second, then released, melting back into the shadows. The hulking driver, startled by his partner's sudden cry, spun around, momentarily confused. "What the hell was that, Carter?" he roared, his rifle now sweeping wildly. "The damn dog! She bit me," the bearded man, whom Amelia now knew as Carter, shrieked, clutching his leg. This was Amelia's window. She didn't wait. With Luna already back at her side, she pushed off the rocks, sprinting deeper into the Appalachians' tangled embrace. They ran for what felt like an eternity, through thickets and over streams, up and down the relentless rolling hills. The adrenaline pulsed through Amelia's veins, dulling the aches in her muscles. Luna, a silent, tireless shadow, continued to lead the way, her instincts unerring, guiding them toward a deeper, more remote section of the forest where Amelia knew there were several small, hidden caves. She could still hear the distant shouts, the occasional crackle of breaking branches, but the sounds were fading, growing more desperate. They had gained significant ground. Luna's attack had worked, it had bought them the crucial moments they needed to escape. Finally, Amelia spotted it, a narrow, almost invisible crevice in a sheer rock face, barely large enough for a woman to squeeze through. It led into a small, dry cave she had discovered weeks ago, a perfect hideout. "In, Luna," she gasped, pushing the dog gently forward. Luna slipped inside, and Amelia followed, pulling a large, thorny bush across the opening to obscure it. Inside the cool, damp darkness, Amelia collapsed onto the rough floor, her chest heaving, her body shaking from exertion. Luna lay down beside her, equally winded, but her gaze remained fixed on the veiled entrance. Amelia pulled Luna close, burying her face in the dog's thick fur. "You saved my life, girl," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Luna responded with a soft lick to Amelia's cheek, a warm, steady presence in the heart of their desperate flight. The pursuit had been brutal, but they had survived, for now. For hours, Amelia and Luna remained in the cool, silent sanctuary of the cave. The immediate sounds of pursuit had faded, replaced by the natural, rhythmic pulse of the forest. Amelia's adrenaline slowly subsided, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and the sharp, metallic taste of fear. She methodically checked Luna for injuries, her hands expertly running over the dog's powerful frame, relieved to find nothing more than a few minor scratches. She then tended to her own scrapes, her movements economical and practiced. In the shared stillness, the bond between woman and dog was a palpable force, a silent acknowledgement of their shared ordeal and survival. But safety was a temporary illusion. She knew her pursuers wouldn't give up easily. They were organized, equipped, and motivated by the $2 million secret still buried in the ravine. She couldn't stay hidden forever, hiding was a tactic, not a strategy. To survive, she needed to move from defense to offense, and that required intelligence. She needed to know who she was fighting. From her waterproof backpack, she carefully removed two items that were her lifeline to the outside world, a small, ruggedized tablet and a compact satellite modem. It was expensive gear, but for a woman who sought solitude in the most remote corners of the country, it was a necessary tool for safety and connection. She set up the small satellite dish near the mouth of the cave, angling it toward the open sky, and waited for the small green light to indicate a stable connection. With Luna standing guard at the entrance, her ears perked, Amelia began her digital investigation. She had two key pieces of physical evidence, the Zippo lighter with the initials KL and a crucial piece of auditory intel she'd gained during the chase, the name Carter, shouted in a moment of panic. Her first step was to revisit the news articles from 1987. She quickly found the original reports of the Guardian security robbery. She scrolled down to the section naming the two missing guards. Her eyes locked onto the second name, Kenneth Larson. The initials matched. For a moment, it seemed simple, the lighter belonged to one of the victims. But Amelia's instincts screamed that it was too easy, too convenient. Why would a killer, after successfully covering their tracks for decades, keep a personal item from one of their victims? It felt wrong. A professional wouldn't make that kind of sentimental mistake. What if the lighter wasn't a trophy but a mistake, something dropped, not taken? This new line of thinking led her to her next search. Who investigated the crime? An investigator would have been all over that scene, both before and after the truck was hidden. Sifting through follow-up articles, she found a piece that quoted local law enforcement officials on the stalled investigation. She scanned the names of the sheriff, the state police captain, and the deputies involved. And then she saw it, a name that made the hair on her arms stand up. The lead investigating deputy from the county sheriff's department, the woman on the ground for the initial search, was named Catherine Lowe. KL. The pieces began to click into place with terrifying speed. She now had two sets of matching initials, one a victim, the other the law. Amelia abandoned the news archives and shifted her focus entirely to Catherine Lowe. She began a new search, cross-referencing the name with public records. She quickly found a short article in a local paper from 1988, just over a year after the heist. Deputy Catherine Lowe was taking an early retirement from the force, citing stress and a desire to pursue private business ventures. For a lead investigator to quit in the middle of the biggest unsolved case in the county's history was more than suspicious, it was a blaring alarm. Now Amelia began to follow the money. This was the final, crucial step. She moved from news archives to searchable public databases for business licenses, property deeds, and tax records. The digital trail that unfolded on the tablet screen told a damning story. In late 1988, Catherine Lowe, a woman on a modest deputy's salary, founded Lowe Construction and Development. In 1989, her company purchased a significant parcel of land just outside Willow Hollow. Throughout the early 1990s, the purchases continued, more land, commercial properties, a new office on Main Street. Catherine Lowe hadn't just started a small business, she had built an empire. Her wealth had grown at a rate that a deputy's pension could never explain. The timeline was perfect. The money from the heist hadn't just vanished, it had been laundered, slowly and carefully, into the legitimate foundations of a local dynasty. Amelia leaned back against the cold cave wall, the tablet resting on her knees. The whole sordid picture was now clear. The lighter didn't belong to Kenneth Larson, the victim, it belonged to Catherine Lowe, the killer. Lowe must have dropped it during the robbery, a single, careless mistake in an otherwise meticulously planned crime. The man in the woods named Carter, who had yelled in pain, was likely a hired hand, the name a bitter cosmic irony. The silence of the cave felt different now. It was no longer a place of refuge but a war room. The enemy was no longer a faceless shadow in the woods, she was Catherine Lowe, a respected local businesswoman, a former pillar of the law enforcement community, and a cold-blooded killer who had built her life on a foundation of stolen money and murder. She had a name, a history, and a weakness, her secret. Amelia looked over at Luna, who had been watching her with unwavering focus. The dog seemed to sense the shift in her partner's demeanor, the cold resolve that had replaced the desperate fear. They were no longer just prey. Amelia had survived the hunt, and now, armed with the truth, she was ready to become the hunter. The knowledge of her enemy's identity settled in Amelia's mind, not with a sense of triumph but with the cold, heavy weight of responsibility. Catherine Lowe was no mere thug, she was a deeply entrenched and powerful figure who had successfully manipulated the system for decades. Going to the local sheriff was out of the question. For all Amelia knew, Lowe's influence extended into the current department. To bring a woman like that to justice, Amelia needed a force that couldn't be bought or intimidated. She needed the FBI. Huddled in the relative safety of the cave, Amelia opened an encrypted messaging application on her tablet. She scrolled through her short list of contacts until she found the name she was looking for, Sarah Delgado. Agent Sarah Delgado was more than just a friend, she was a sister in arms, a woman whose life Amelia had saved during a chaotic ambush in Kandahar. The debt between them was one of unspoken, absolute trust. Sarah, now a seasoned agent in the FBI's Pittsburgh field office, was Amelia's only viable lifeline. Amelia began to type, her fingers flying across the screen. She laid out the entire story in a concise, fact-based report: the initial discovery by Luna, the excavation, the contents of the Iron Tomb, the research in Willow Hollow, the warning with the knife, and the subsequent pursuit by armed men. She attached the high-resolution photos she had taken, the skeletons, the hidden money, and the most crucial piece of evidence, the Zippo lighter with the clear initials KL. She concluded the message with her findings on Catherine Lowe, her suspicious retirement, and her inexplicable wealth. She hit send, and the message disappeared into the digital ether. For an hour, there was only silence. Amelia sat with Luna, the tension in the small cave thick enough to cut with a knife. Then her tablet buzzed, a reply from Sarah. Amelia, are you secure? Is this a joke? Amelia typed back, completely secure, and I wish it were a joke. I'm in deep, Sarah, Another pause, longer this time. Then a new message, I've reviewed the photos. The lighter is damning. Armored car robbery is a federal crime, and given the homicides and the potential for local law enforcement corruption, this falls squarely in our jurisdiction. I trust you, Amelia, you know I do, but I can't just send in a team from Pittsburgh. That's not how it works, Amelia's heart sank, but she typed back, what's the play, then? The right way, Sarah's message appeared. I'm packaging everything you sent me into an official intelligence report. I'm sending it via secure channels to the special agent in charge of the Charleston field office, that's their territory. I'll flag it as high priority, time-sensitive, with a credible threat to a citizen witness, that's you. This will get their attention, Amelia, but it will take time. They'll have to verify, get warrants. It could be 24 hours, maybe 48. Can you stay safe for that long, I don't plan on staying safe, Amelia typed. I plan on ending this. She knew she couldn't just wait to be rescued. Lowe's men were still out there, and they would be combing the woods for her. She had to force Lowe's hand, make her act recklessly. She had to bait the trap. Her research had revealed a popular independent news blog called The Appalachian Truth, run by a local journalist known for her willingness to challenge authority and publish controversial stories. She was exactly the kind of disruptive force Amelia needed. Amelia created a new, anonymous email address through a secure service. The email she composed was short, sharp, and designed to detonate the decades of peace Catherine Lowe had built for herself. She attached only one file, a crystal clear, close-up photograph of the Zippo lighter, the initials KL gleaming under the light of her flashlight. The body of the email was just 2 sentences. Ask Willow Hollow's most successful businesswoman, Miss Catherine Lowe, what she might have dropped in the woods back in 1987. Some things don't stay buried forever, she sent the email, then immediately deleted the account, severing the digital thread. The message was out. It was a lit fuse, and it was only a matter of time before it reached the powder keg. Lowe, upon seeing that lighter, would know that her secret was not just discovered but that the physical evidence linking her directly to the crime scene was in someone else's hands. She wouldn't send her men, she couldn't trust them with something this critical. She would have to come herself. Amelia shut down her equipment and packed her bag. The time for hiding was over. The FBI was in motion, but their timeline was too slow. The blogger's post would be her catalyst, forcing a confrontation on her terms. "Come on, girl," she said to Luna, her voice a low, determined rumble. "Let's go home." They slipped out of the cave, not heading back to their compromised campsite but moving with a new purpose. They traveled through the dense woods, using the fading daylight to their advantage, circling back toward the one place she knew Lo would have to go. They were returning to the Iron Tomb in the ravine. It was where the story had begun, and Amelia was determined to make it the place where the story would end. She was no longer the prey, she was now setting the stage, preparing the battlefield for the final act. Amelia and Luna reached the ravine under the cloak of deep twilight. The setting sun had painted the Appalachians in bruised purples and fiery oranges, but down in the gully, darkness was already absolute, save for the faint glow of the distant horizon. Amelia knew this terrain intimately now. She moved with purpose, Luna a silent shadow at her heels. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a carefully chosen battlefield. She spent the next few hours setting up. The exposed armored vehicle, its door a gaping maw, was the focal point. Around it, Amelia established a series of tripwires and strategically placed obstacles, not to injure but to create noise and channel movement. She positioned herself and Luna on a small, elevated ledge overlooking the vehicle, offering excellent cover and a clear line of sight to the approaches. She pulled out her night vision monocular, sweeping the logging track and the surrounding woods. The air was cold, damp, and still. The tension was a palpable, living thing. Just after midnight, the hum of distant engines broke the silence. 2 vehicles. Amelia's hand tightened on her rifle. This was it. The headlights cut through the darkness as the black SUVs, identical to the ones from the pursuit, slowly navigated the rough track. They stopped short of the ravine, perhaps 100 yards away. 3 figures emerged. 2 were the men from the previous chase, the hulking driver and the bearded man, Carter, who walked with a noticeable limp, a grim testament to Luna's earlier intervention. The third figure was older, distinguished even in the low light, with a commanding presence that radiated a lifetime of authority. She wore an expensive-looking dark coat, her silver hair catching the faint ambient light. This had to be Catherine Lowe. Amelia watched through the monocular as Lowe, looking furious and agitated, gestured emphatically toward the ravine. She barked orders at her 2 men, who then fanned out, their rifles held ready. Amelia noted Lowe's own hand resting inside her coat, a telltale sign of a concealed weapon. The older woman was dangerous, not just with money and power but with a primal, desperate rage. Carter and the driver cautiously approached the ravine. Amelia let them pass her outer tripwires, preferring to deal with them closer to the vehicle. She heard the faint jingle of cans as the hulking driver stumbled over one of her inner tripwires. "Damn it, Carter, watch your step," the driver hissed. "It's booby-trapped." Carter whispered back, his voice strained, "She's waiting for us." As they reached the edge of the ravine, Amelia decided to make her presence known. She dropped a small, heavy rock, dislodging a cascade of pebbles that clattered loudly down the slope. "Hello, gentlemen," Amelia's voice cut through the silence, amplified by the natural acoustics of the gully. "Looking for something?" Carter and the driver immediately snapped their rifles up, scanning the shadows. "Harper, show yourself!" Carter yelled, his voice laced with a mix of fear and anger. "You already know what I'm looking for," Amelia countered, her voice calm, controlled. "And you know I found it." Lowe, infuriated, strode to the edge of the ravine, her face contorted with rage. "You meddling fool. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Oh, I think I do," Amelia replied. "Catherine Lowe, former deputy, current owner of Willow Hollow, future resident of a federal prison." Lowe roared, pulling a compact semi-automatic pistol from inside her coat. "You won't live to tell anyone anything," she bellowed, firing wildly into the darkness. The muzzle flash momentarily blinded her, the shots ricocheting harmlessly off the rocks above Amelia's position. "Luna, neutralize," Amelia commanded, pointing toward the hulking driver, who was struggling to get a clear shot. Luna, a phantom in the low light, sprang from her cover. She moved with astonishing speed, not toward Lo but toward the driver, who was momentarily distracted by Lo's outburst. Before he could react, Luna launched herself at the man's weapon hand, her powerful jaws clamping down not on flesh but directly on the rifle's stock. The driver yelled in pain and surprise as the rifle was wrenched from his grasp, clattering down the slope. Luna released, a low growl rumbling, and melted back into the shadows, her mission accomplished. "My gun, you damn dog," the driver screamed, clutching his now useless hand. Amelia took advantage of the chaos. She moved swiftly, descending from her perch, appearing from the darkness behind Carter before the bearded man could even turn his rifle. Amelia delivered a swift, practiced strike to the back of his neck, sending him sprawling unconscious. Now it was just Amelia, Luna, and Catherine Lo. The older woman, shaken by the sudden incapacitation of her men, stood alone, her pistol wavering. Her face was a mask of desperation, her eyes darting frantically between Amelia, the unconscious men, and the shadowy depths of the ravine. "It's over, Lo," Amelia said, stepping fully into the dim light. "The money's gone. The bodies are found. The lighter has your initials." "No!" Lo shrieked, her voice cracking with fear and fury. "It's mine. All of it. 40 years, you don't understand what I did." Her pistol, still clutched in her trembling hand, wavered dangerously. "You already did that once, didn't you?" Amelia countered, her voice cold. "Tell me, Lo, how many bullets did it take to silence 2 men who trusted you? Did Kenneth Larson know it was you? Did he see the KL on your lighter right before you pulled the trigger?" The words struck Lo like physical blows. Her face twisted with raw, agonizing memories, her eyes full of terror and regret, momentarily losing their focus. This was the opening Amelia needed. Lo was vulnerable, exposed. "They just trusted me," Lo stammered, her voice barely a whisper, a tremor running through her entire body. "They trusted me. I told them it was a setup, easy money. Then it went wrong. Larson, he saw the lighter. I had to." As Lo's confession spilled out, the sound of approaching sirens, faint but unmistakable, began to echo through the hills. Lo's head snapped up, her eyes widening in pure horror. She lunged, not at Amelia but toward the entrance of the armored truck, perhaps hoping to retrieve something or make a last desperate stand. But Amelia was faster. She anticipated the move, intercepting Lo before she could reach the door. The older woman, surprisingly strong in her desperation, struggled fiercely, but Amelia's training was superior. She disarmed Lo with a quick, fluid motion, sending the pistol skittering across the rocky ground. She then brought Lo down, gently but firmly, pinning her against the cold, hard earth. Luna stood guard, a silent, menacing presence. "It's done, Lo," Amelia said, looking down at the defeated woman. "It's all done." The wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the crisp night air, a symphony of justice descending upon the hidden ravine. Catherine Lo, pinned to the cold earth by Amelia, listened to the approaching sounds, her face a mask of utter defeat. The fight had drained out of her, replaced by the hollow realization that her meticulously constructed empire of lies and stolen wealth was crumbling. Luna stood over her, a silent, unmoving guardian, her eyes fixed on the defeated woman. Suddenly, the ravine was flooded with blinding lights. Tactical teams, moving with disciplined precision, swarmed down the banks. FBI agents, identifiable by their vests and badges, took strategic positions, their weapons ready. The first 2 agents to reach the armored vehicle immediately moved to secure Catherine Lo and her 2 unconscious henchmen, who were quickly cuffed. A woman stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the scene. She was tall, with a no-nonsense demeanor and a look of calm authority. Her eyes quickly found Amelia, who was standing back, allowing the agents to work. "Amelia Harper," the agent asked, her voice firm but respectful. "That's me," Amelia replied. Luna, sensing the situation was under control, nudged Amelia's leg, a quiet reassurance. "Special Agent in Charge Martinez, Charleston Field Office," the agent introduced herself, offering a hand. Agent Delgado filled us in. "Good work, Harper." "Very good work." She glanced at Luna with a nod of approval. "And a very good partner." Amelia simply nodded, her gaze distant, taking in the scene. Forensic teams were already moving in, meticulously documenting the crime scene within the armored vehicle. Flashbulbs popped, illuminating the skeletal remains, the scattered shell casings, the broken safe. The hidden compartment was quickly located, and the bundles of cash were carefully extracted and tagged. The Zippo lighter, which Amelia had handed over to Agent Martinez, was placed into an evidence bag. Agent Martinez turned back to Amelia. "Your testimony, along with the evidence we've collected and, frankly, Ms. Lowe's rather enthusiastic confession, will be enough to put her away for a very long time, not just for the original robbery and murders but for the attempted murder of a federal witness." "You." Amelia looked at the now handcuffed Lowe, who was being led away, her face pale and her head bowed. There was no triumph in Amelia's heart, only a quiet, somber satisfaction. The dead men in the truck would finally have their names cleared, their families given closure. The millions of stolen dollars, once a curse, would be returned. The process of debriefing was long and exhaustive. Amelia recounted the entire story to Agent Martinez and her team, providing every detail, every observation. She showed them where she had found the vehicle, how she had deduced Lowe's involvement, and how she had set the trap. Luna remained by her side throughout, a silent witness to the unfolding events. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky in soft hues of rose and gold, the ravine began to transform. The grim tableau of the night was softened by the returning light. Amelia felt a profound sense of release. The heavy burden she had carried since uncovering the vehicle began to lift. She had sought peace in these woods, and in a strange, violent twist of fate, she had found it, not in escaping the past but in confronting it. Later that morning, after the last of the forensic teams had packed up and the scene was secured, Amelia and Luna stood on a familiar ridge, the very same rocky outcrop where Amelia had once found solace, looking out over the sprawling green expanse of the Appalachians. The air was clean, fresh, and free of the lingering stench of decay. The mist had burned off, revealing the endless, undulating hills, vibrant with the promise of a new day. Amelia knelt, wrapping her arms around Luna's powerful neck. The dog leaned into her embrace, a soft rumble in her chest. "We did it, girl," Amelia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We finally did it." Luna licked her face, her warmth a comforting presence against Amelia's cheek. The bond between them, forged in combat and tested by this unexpected journey, was stronger than ever. They had faced the darkness together and emerged into the light. The nightmares might still come, the echoes of her own past might still whisper, but now Amelia knew she had made a difference. She had brought justice where there was only silence, truth where there were only lies. And in doing so, she had found a profound, undeniable sense of peace within herself. The Appalachians, which had drawn her in search of quiet, had offered her something far more meaningful, a path to healing, paved with courage and unwavering loyalty. She and Luna, two old soldiers, stood side by side, ready for whatever quiet life awaited them, finally at peace with the world and with themselves. In the quietest corners of our hearts, we learn that true peace isn't found by escaping the world but by finding the courage to face its shadows with a loyal friend at our side. The bond between a person and an animal is a profound reminder that loyalty and love can heal the deepest wounds. If this story touched your soul, we would be honored if you would support us by subscribing to our channel. Your likes, shares, and comments help these stories of courage reach those who need the most. Our next journey is already waiting for you right here on the screen.